Let me explain what I believe is the greatest threat to America's future, which is not North Korea, Russia, or any other foreign adversary, but instead an idea called intersectionality. The idea that there is a system of discrimination which creates an environment of disadvantage for people of different race, class, and gender. Almost like structural racism, but on steroids. In this video, I'm going to make an attempt to explain how intersectionality is nothing more than a revolutionary component created by globalists to usher in a socialist system. I'm going to do this utilizing 5 steps. In step 1, they first forge a commonality among minority groups that have no other shared interests other than hate for the present majority, and through intersectionality appear as a semi-majority. As with the idea of structural or systemic racism, intersectionality teaches that racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, xenophobia, and classism are all a structural part of an oppressive institution prejudicially interconnected. By propagating there is a commonality through intersectionality, they then psychologically coerce those susceptible to the information to stand with them against those that they perceive in power, or the majority, mainly heterosexual white males. But I'm Puerto Rican and I've been called a racist for speaking the truth and a coon by Hispanics and African Americans for being a conservative. This propaganda is as effective as Nazi propaganda leaflets, whose only intent was to encourage further warfare and forge a sense of commonality in its soldiers by stigmatizing the opposition and force-feeding propaganda. But what it really boils down to is that intersectionality is nothing more than a consolidation of hate-filled, entitled bigots driven by the common practice of scapegoating, inclusively a bunch of promiscuous women suffering from misandry. The second phase is to use all of these different groups that make up intersectionality: black and brown pride hate groups, LGBTQP, paid agitators known as Antifa, resistance, etc., to be eventually utilized to delegitimize America in the eyes not only of left-leaning Americans and rhinos, but in the eyes of the international community as well. In case they were ever to attempt a coup, it would not be contested by the UN or the international community, because as everybody knows, Trump has already been labeled and stigmatized a bigot. Phase 3, utilizing the mainstream media to draw international eyes to their cause by conducting left-wing political histrionics after Trump's election, by the way. Women's March, Black Lives Matter protests, LGBTQ protests, Council on American Islamic Relations even found a platform as well, leading these communities to experience psychological and emotional desensitization towards the perceived opposing community. Now, all of a sudden, Antifa shutting down free speech is acceptable. Burning down Berkeley is acceptable. Hitting women with flagpoles and eggs is acceptable. Oh, and let's not forget removing Confederate monuments that I didn't know, that most of us didn't know existed till white Democrats started saying is racist. Which is ironic to me because the KKK was founded by the Southern Democratic Party. And it was the Democrats who, from the 1870s to the 1930s, used the KKK to deter Republicans from voting in favor of all civil rights laws. Or it might just be a ploy to cover up their history through historical revisionism, and thereafter through historical denialism by denying their history and scapegoating, pointing fingers at conservatives. Today, the groups that were once targeted by the left have been psychologically coerced to champion for their past oppressors, by simply utilizing the race-baiting discussion platform to promote defeatism within their communities. Phase 4 occurred during Obama's administration, establishing an American society more dependent on the government through the expansion of warfarism. Let's recall that after Obama finished his warfare campaign, it left America with a $20 trillion debt and more than 1/3 or approximately 109 million people in America dependent on the U.S. government for assistance in one form or another. Which of course started equating to lazier Americans and more jobs open for cheaper labor in the form of illegal immigrants. NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have gradually worked to legalize this cultural Marxism. But because Trump was elected, the globalist agenda was put on pause. It hasn't been stopped, only put on pause because Trump only has 8 years maximum in power. And repealing all of his doings will be as easily done as how he's done it with Obama's legacy. Fifth and last phase is extreme cultural Marxism or reform, utilizing fascist groups within U.S. soil to practice silencing opposing ideas, utilize the mainstream media to normalize it by glorifying Antifa as championing for what's right, and use politicians to credibilize it. Antifa, like the KKK, will be a paramilitary group utilized by the left to silence not only the right, but anyone who opposes socialism, which is one of the many working mechanisms that will slowly but gradually lead to globalism in the form of a one world order made up of 7 regional powers. Another thing I wanted to add, just in case people are gullible enough to believe that this is all a resolved coincidence, I'd like to point at the fact that globalists control something called the doomsday clock, which is a symbolic way of measuring how close we are to a man-made global catastrophe. Midnight is representative of an apocalyptic event. Keeping that in mind, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists have moved the doomsday clock to 2.5 minutes to midnight after Trump got inaugurated. This is the closest that the clock has been to midnight since 1953 when the Soviet Union was testing hydrogen bombs. By the way, feel free to research this fact by Googling doomsday clock. And once you Google doomsday clock, go to the encyclopedia or the Wikipedia and read the description, and it will explicitly tell you that the clock was brought up to 2.5 minutes to midnight after Trump's election because he aroused nationalism in people not only nationally but globally. Just look at what was happening in France. Just look at the Brexit and such. Anyways, everybody, with that being stated, I just wanted to share some important facts in what I believe is going on in this world, because ultimately the most important part of having information is sharing information, and each one teach one, and knowledge is power. With that being stated, everybody, stay safe, stay informed. La Maga, let's all make America great again. One topic at a time.